It has been steel, it's been aluminum, it's even been carbon raced at the top level of the pro peloton, crashed in the most miraculous ways at Red Hook Crit, and even enjoyed by all of the newest of newcomer curious road bikers. This is all the history that you never ever think about when it comes to the Allez. As legend would have it, and as the story goes, in 1974, Mike Sinyard, a man that you may have heard of before, sold his Volkswagen bus for $1,500 to fund a trip to Europe. Landing in Italy and eventually linking up with Mr. Sino Cinelli himself, buying handlebars, buying stems, and bringing back those artisanally, specialty built parts for sale in the United States. Artisanally, specialty built, hence specialized. Oversimplifying completely and with some success on the importing and selling of Italian, European cycling goods. In 1976, Sinyard eventually developed his own first product through Specialized bicycle components, the Specialized touring tire. Apparently they were pretty good. People said they rolled better than what they could get from Europe. I don't know much about it. Let's just keep going. So, with a popular product and brand recognition starting to take hold, the obvious next step is to begin the development of bikes that would strike the same chords that importing and selling desirable European parts would. Remember, at the time, European bikes were the sexy, desirable, expensive option on the bike showroom floor. So the gamble is an American-designed, European-influenced, artisanal built bike would be incredibly enticing, so long as the price was a little bit lower than the comparable European counterpart. Design of such a bike started with Tim Neenan of Lighthouse Cycles in collaboration with Sinyard in Japan before production in 1979. Working with renowned Japanese frame builder San Rensho, the Specialized Allez eventually debuted in 1981 with two other bikes, the Sequoia and the Stump Jumper. The first edition Allez were built with Tange tubing and equipped with full Campagnolo top to bottom, dripping in it. Building it with a brand name tube set and dressing it campy top to bottom makes sense in an effort to emulate the European counterparts that it's going to be showroomed beside. A San Rensho built Allez should be indistinguishable from a European built counterpart, therefore just as desirable. Now, whether or not they were released to ecstatic fanfare, I don't know. There's an unfortunate lack of sales data, racing data, and information as a whole regarding that subject. It sort of means relying on forum posting historians to give up some of that information based on stories that they remember or data that they may actually have. The cool part about that, especially it being in relatively modern history, and especially in the case of Specialized history, Bryant Bainbridge, a senior designer for Specialized, will often create an account on whatever forum it is to address questions and history when it comes to these subjects. In fact, based on my experience and what I saw while I was researching this video, he may be watching this right now. Hi, Brian. Thanks for watching. So as far as I can tell, from 1981 to 1983, the Allez was indeed fabricated and assembled by San Rensho. It was built as its own standalone model. There was no other ones to choose from. But in 1984, the Specialized Allez SE was introduced to the lineup. And it was introduced to the lineup as a lower cost, more economical option. Production of it did change hands a couple times due to some disagreements with Miata and Specialized talking in the design department. But in 1986, the American dollar all but collapsed against the yen, which would just make bikes being produced in Japan an unfeasible task to continue taking on. And all but two bikes were moved to Taiwan for production. In a seemingly last-ditch effort before every bit of production was moved to Taiwan, the top-of-the-line Allez was contracted out to fabricator Dave Tesk, using Columbus steel on some of the models for 1987, but Tesk had a hard time bridging the gap from a full custom builder to a production builder, and deliveries ended up faltering. In the end, they only received 65 of the 100 ordered, so pretty rare bike. By the late 80s, most of, if not all, production was moved to Taiwan for specialized bikes, the Allez notwithstanding. The factory building specialized bikes, giant. As Bainbridge writes, Mark Danuzzi literally spent a month living in the factory showing them how to braze and produce decent bikes. Jeez, I wish I could be that devoted to anything. It's also in this era that the introduction of the Allez Epic happens. A carbon fiber tubed, steel lugged, glued together piece of engineering. The year, 1988. Apparently at the time, Taiwan was making some investments and some pushes to become one of the world leaders in carbon fiber technologies, and Giant was one of the first to receive investments in that category. The Allez Epic, to look at, is a crude design based on today's standards, but at the time, I guess it was a fairly strong machine. They couldn't really break them, but I feel like people were still weary of the technology at the time, and eventually they were phased out. Nevertheless, the introduction of a carbon-tubed, steel-lugged, glued-together frame set was an indication that there's other materials coming in, and possibly the days of steel Allez race bikes were a little bit numbered. In 1994, a new material is introduced into the Allez lineup with the M2 aluminum build. As aluminum quickly became the material of choice for the Allez and many other bikes on the market, the carbon Allez Epic and the steel Allez would be removed from the catalog by 1997. Of course, the Epic name would live on in the cross-country mountain bike side of the lineup. This would be the era that I would say a lot of the development efforts were probably being pulled away from the Allez to work on a new machine that would use the most cutting edge of technologies and become
the premier racing machine
for the big S. In 2003, maybe more notably 2005, there's an introduction of the Tarmac to the world. It's the beginnings of that cutting edge carbon fiber road race bike and marks the end of the Allez reign at the top of the road bike tier. The Allez seemingly brushed aside as an onlooker to the Tarmac, which was receiving all of the time and effort with carbon as the company's new focus. Brochures touting the Tarmac as the weapon of choice for winning races, destroying the road, and then the Allez as the aluminum workhorse that you can get started on while you're working towards buying that dream Tarmac. Specialized did eventually give the Allez a bit of a makeover to match the silhouette of its younger sibling, the Tarmac, but it still sort of lived in the shadow as the more affordable, more workhorsey version. Though for the Allez, the tide started to turn a little bit with the introduction of Chuck Chixera into the aluminum department and the implementation of Daluzio Smartweld, DSW, hydroforming a head tube, top tube, and down tube to meet away from the traditional joining position. Later, DSW would be applied to the bottom bracket on the Allez, and an Aero C-tube seat post was added as well to create the Allez Sprint. The Sprint at first was kind of a weird bike. It was introduced by only being 1x compatible. But once it proved its racing capabilities on road and track crits, and the very clever paint scheme marketing campaign that Specialized ran for each stage of the Red Hook crit, the popularity of the Allez Sprint platform exploded. A frameset that's fast, harsh, and none too expensive to replace if you destroy it, caught the attention of a lot of riders looking to build hot, inexpensive Instagram bikes. Inexpensive. Literally just search up the hashtag Allez Sprint and you'll see them everywhere. Hell, I've got one! Peter Sagan even raced a disc brake equipped one in, insert the year here. The Allez straddles the line of a desirable bike and still having all those more affordable entry-level bikes as options as well. The regular Allez, I'm afraid, will probably never live up to its early, exciting times of being one of the first bikes that Specialized ever created, though the Sprint may be able to carry the torch as a cult classic for more years to come. I like that it's a name that has literally been around since the first bikes that Specialized has ever created. The Allez this year has 40 years of a model released every single year. 40 years of history. Okay, what bike do you want to see history you've never thought of before next? Did I miss anything? I know I did. I missed so much stuff, but this video would be way too long. Bye.